Whoa. So in theory, we are live, and someone will tell us that, I'm sure, at some point. Although the stream looks like it's just a black window, and there's nothing there. Ah, there we go. Hello, sorry about that. My name's Alan, and I work in developer relations at Anchore on the open source team. And the people beside me are part of that open source team who are responsible for the wonderful tools you see on the screen, Syft and Grype, and many other tools as well, and components. We've got Keith on that side and Will on that side. Hello, chaps. How you doing?
Howdy.
Howdy. We may see more faces appear in the ominous black zones at the end of this Zoom window. We shall see. Someone forgot their charger. We'll not say any more than that. So we do this every Thursday, and it's an opportunity for us to... hello, Chris. How are you doing? Chris has joined in part of the void of this window. We do this every Thursday, and it's an opportunity for us to talk about some issues, do some work that we were going to be doing anyway, but do it in a live stream so we could get people involved. And if they want to join and ask questions, they can do. Or if you want to watch this later at 2 times speed or whatever, then you can do that. If you need something to help you go to sleep, maybe, I don't know, you could watch that. I'm always looking for podcast recommendations and YouTube recommendations to go to sleep, but more on that later. So if you want to know more about the team and the products, you'll find anchor.com/open source. Anchor are the commercial sponsor behind Syft and Grype, but they're fully open source software, Apache licensed. So if you want to get involved, you can do, and you can get involved. That was the wrong key. Over on GitHub. All our repositories that have open source software are all on here, including Syft and Grype. So they're all listed under here. There's loads more further down. But yeah, that's where most of the conversations happen. But we also have a discourse instance. The easy way to get to that is just go anchor.com/discourse. And hello, Josh, our colleague in the chat. Hopefully he can let me know whether the audio is working, because last week I broke it. So yes. So what you'll also see at the bottom is the screen sharing. And then over on the side, you can see there's some data about some of our repositories. So Stereoscope is one of the components. It'll be listed down here somewhere in amongst all the others. But you'll notice the little stars. Oh, look at that. Syft is up at 6,000 and some. And loads of forks and loads of issues, and yeah, when they some of them, it's quite sad. Less than 100. I'd love to see some of these get a little bit higher. Grant, Quill, Stereoscope. It'd be lovely to see them a little bit higher. Maybe we should down tools and not do anything until the number of stars get above 100 or something. I don't think that would be a very good idea. Anyway, so we've got a list of things to talk about. Usually everyone brings something that needs discussion, and they're tagged needs discussion here. I wanted to call out something. Maybe Will might want to talk about this. I don't want to throw you under the bus for this, but you started a thread back in August to let everyone know that we're deprecating a certain database schema format, which shouldn't really affect anyone because most people are using a version newer than Grype 13, which is old and crusty by now. So that was implemented today, I guess.
Yep, that's about it. So if you are using a 3.5-year-old install of Grype, it is time to upgrade. You will not get a new vulnerability database tomorrow. If your Grype installation is younger than 3.5, then carry on. But consider moving to the latest anyway. We've done lots of cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, GitHub are kind enough to show us the download numbers for these things. And most people, are using modern versions of the software. But, you never know. Someone might have compiled the source and have that binary sat somewhere on their system. Had we implemented at that time the little reminder that tells you you're running an outdated version, so they get nagged every time they launch it?
I don't
Your
know. It predates my involvement in the project,
Oh
honestly.
wow, it's that long ago. Okay, right. Okay. Um, well, that'd be a fun academic exercise to try out. Shall we start with? Does anyone have any announcements? I mean, it's worth messaging that there was a new version of Syft and Grype that went out today. New releases 5 hours ago. Syft 1.17. Well done, Will. I'm getting that out the door. And Grype as well, 4 hours ago, 0.85. So a good opportunity while you're here downloading. You could probably click that little star icon up there. That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it? Oh, look, we're nearly at 9K. Oh, man. I'll shut up about stars. And does anyone have anything they want to talk about specifically?
I had one that I wanted to talk about. Let me find it. It's Syft 3447. Will and I looked at this one during the community meeting this week, like when we all sync up to find issues. Um, if you scroll down, I guess we can go with the first part. The gist is that in the Cyclone DXS bomb you see here, there's 4 component types: library, device driver, platform, application. And when we run this through Syft, or when we run through Grype, or do any kind of convert commands, if it passes through the Syft monster, right, Syft will drop a couple of those package types. So if you go to my comment where I reproduced it, you can see that for Cyclone DX, we switch on things like application or container or framework type. But when it comes to the device driver or platform, I think we kind of just throw those on the floor. They do not belong in our switch statement. And so I guess my question is for the team, is this something that we want to support directly in Syft, even though our catalogers cannot surface things like device driver or individual platform components as like described by Cyclone DX? And is it something that we just want to live at the adapter/format layer, or do we only want to bring these in when we get a cataloger that can actually assert and raise up this package type? That's the gist of it.
That's an interesting question. I have a couple of thoughts, but I think there's 2 different facets here. One is, should Syft be able to convert things that aren't part of Syft's data model? And 2, should Syft have a data model that includes some of these other things that we're dropping today? And those 2 things don't necessarily have the same answer to me. I kind of think that that making Syft convert as good as it possibly could be should be a goal of ours for Syft to convert. And maybe that means that we know that formats support things, especially now, like taking SPDX3, for example. There's a lot of stuff in there that just doesn't map to Syft's data model. And so if we say, part of what Syft convert can do is, I don't know, like track data that it would otherwise drop and say like, oh, this was imported data. I don't know what it is, but I know it's a package. Here's all the information I know about it. And so then maybe a Syft convert would actually be able to output that if you output Cyclone DX again for some reason, or if SPDX supported the same thing and whatnot, potentially. Anyway, I think that's like for the convert aspect of it. To me, like the answer to me is yes, but I don't know exactly how that should work. Should Syft have a data model that has support for this stuff? That's a different question. And I also think that one might be related to like a Syft 2.0 question or discussion, because I've kind of long felt that we maybe should think about having like other types of top level packages. And like a good example is today we have the source and we don't really have a package. And so we've got some stuff that's like the name, you can have a source name and a source version, and people want to specify other stuff for that package, but we don't actually have a package in the Syft data model. It's something else. And so like, to me, I think that we should have a package for that. And like, we could extend that to like have a bunch of different other stuff that maybe Syft doesn't even necessarily pick up, but yeah, I guess that's a really long-winded way of saying I think we definitely should support this in a number of different ways.
So let's put the convert story to the side a bit, because I agree with a lot of your points on enhancing the support for these component types. Let's talk about the specific case of the issue where the user is passing it in using the SBOM cataloger. And so when Syft does an SBOM cataloger and says, I'm going to take this SBOM and use it as a source of packages, combine it with a directory or container analysis, and smush those together into one big format model, is it on us to make sure we represent the entire enum of all component types in all SBOM formats so that we don't drop packages on the floor when the SBOM cataloger is run? Is that like, yeah, go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say, I think yes. I think there are two places where, like, even if Syft doesn't have a dedicated cataloger that like detects device driver type packages today or something, like Syft convert obviously can I think should go from like any valid CDX SBOM to a valid SPDX or Syft SBOM as far as possible. And like obviously like the set of things that can be represented in the different formats is a little distinct. Like the different formats have different kinds of information that can be written down. So lossless conversion is not always possible, but I don't think there's any reason to like willingly take lossiness in the conversion, if that makes sense, right? Like if one spec is ambiguous or there's nowhere, like if we're converting into a format we don't control and there's just nowhere to put that information, maybe we have to drop it. But this feels a little bit like an unforced error, right? Like we're leaving it. And then I think the other place is the SBOM cataloger, right? Like if we find, if the SBOM cataloger is switched on and we find a cyclodx SBOM in the image and it includes these package types, we should emit them in whatever our output is. And those are basically the same use case. So yeah, I think yes. As far as possible, Syft convert and the SBOM cataloger should be lossless and correct. And this is an example where they're not.
Can Syft currently handle a package that has no concrete metadata type? So if like we were to pull these in and then we were to say, okay, well, we don't have a cataloger that can actually like surface these. We want to create a package. Can we just, is that a required field in the schema? That's I don't know or remember at right now.
Well, let's say it is, but I mean, we could have something that's like a, generic placeholder type or whatever, right?
Okay.
Like could encompass some of this stuff that's like, we don't really know what it is, but we got some data from somewhere.
I agree with Will's ambition on that these should be packages. I'm just trying to highlight or maybe surface if there are any like direct hurdles that we would have right now to making that a reality, like with our current model.
Well, I mean, we have the distinct problem that anything that we surface from the SBOM cataloger has to be able to fit into the Syft SBOM, right? So, I mean, that like, which is distinct from convert. So, and you said like, let's drop convert. And I think that's a good call, because this actually, I should have read, but this is even more interesting because it's not actually convert. It's like SBOM cataloger. And I'm not sure
they overlap. The use cases overlap.
Yeah, definite overlap, but I'm not sure if it's the same assumptions between the two, right? If I scan a file system, let's say, and I find an SBOM, like what Syft is trying to do today is like surface all the packages that it finds in there. So like in that aspect, if there's a package with a type we don't understand, we probably should try to have a way to surface that. But like some of the other random data, I don't know, like maybe not that much. I don't know, does that make sense? Like take for example, like SPDX3, we find some SPDX3 thing with like some AI thing that's not a package, right? Like we don't have any, let's say for argument's sake, we don't have any place to put this in the Syft SBOM because the data model. So then what do we do, right? Because the catalogers are returning packages, relationships, and error, and that's it. That's the signature only allows them to return that stuff.
So you're saying, like, what if we find a large file that's not a package?
Well, what if we find an SBOM that has data that's not a package? Right, okay, like we scan the Syft, or we scan, the CycloneDX JSON. Well, it's got files in there, right? I guess like where are we putting those? Like we're not putting those in the main file section, right? They have to be embedded somehow in a package so that they can get returned from the cataloger. And like not everything falls into that category of it could be embedded into a package and makes sense. So that's
that makes sense. So it sounds like then it would be easier to realize the ambition of being lossless and correct and complete for Syft convert than for the SBOM cataloger.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we wanted to go further on the SBOM cataloger, how does the type unknown package work as like a bucket for things like this, where we haven't found like a good. I'm talking about Syft PKG, the package PKG, and then the hard package .type, where every single type gets put onto a Syft package based on the cataloger that it originated from. If we have something incoming that we don't have a specific bucket to put it in, is the unknown package like used for a different semantic reason than something when we're decoding an SBOM we don't have another bucket to put it in, or do we need something else to say, hey, we don't have any like labeling for this or any kind of like ecosystem for this yet, but we want to be lossless, so we're going to carry it through to the eventual artifact that we output?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different cases. One of the cases is that we scan something that was generated by Syft, and then it would have a type that we would want to retain anyway, right? So I guess we wouldn't for those cases we wouldn't like have some kind of an unknown thing. But let's say for the other things that we
the CycloneDX input that he did, like these like a platform or
right. But I mean, even like a Syft CycloneDX, for example, it will have type information for the packages, right? Like so it will have a Python type or a something or other. But like I said, let's say for argument's sake, whatever it is, we find a package and it's not something that we know how to get a type for. Maybe unknown is like the wrong term, but I'm thinking of like a placeholder that's kind of like.
No, I'm asking because we already have type equals unknown package like in the lexicon.
Oh, right.
So I didn't know if that was part of the unknown unknowns PR or like why that type existed in the first place. I was trying to figure out if you knew where that came from or why we have it.
I don't know where it came from, but I think that we probably have it because we have a number of like switch statements where we go, switch over types of things and like do some different behavior. So I'm guessing that like we have some that's like, oh, if it's an unknown thing, do some behavior somewhere. But that was not, as far as that wasn't part of the unknowns work. That was something that existed before.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the thing is really we just like should try to add some types that we know how to map back to to some of these package types that we're dropping. It's kind of, I guess that's what I was thinking with unknown is like do that and then like just drop the SBOM in the metadata section or something like that, where it's like here's verbatim what we found when we did a Syft convert, and like that's that's it. Like we don't know what to do with it. It's just here, and you can like maybe the CycloneDX encoder knows to like look there and, oh, I found a CycloneDX package, just dump it back out or something like that.
Yeah, because it's still lossy if you dump one of these ones that we don't handle correctly into the unknown bucket. Because then, like, where do you get the information from if you want to go back to the Cyclone DX document? And you say, well, that came in as a cryptographic asset, but Syft doesn't have any conception of like what that is. So when it tries to go back out, it can't return, the same corpus of info.
Right. Right. And I think we have kind of talked about for like having Syft convert do, I don't like sidecar is probably not the right term, but like having some side data that it can kind of put on packages and files and whatever else.
Right.
For purposes like this, that like because we don't want to be lossy if we can avoid it there. And so I guess like if we're doing it, whatever we're doing for Syft convert, we probably should be doing for the SBOM cataloger to the best, of our ability with whatever we raise up. And like that could just be packages with, this kind of like sidecar raw data that's included that we don't really like try to do too much to.
So this is getting a little out there for a recommendation or suggestion, or this is me just thinking about it. But should a Syft package have subtypes that represent the other formats, like data entries in their like entirety? So like if I'm bringing in a Cyclone DX package, and instead of like converting it and mapping each field in Syft to a field from Cyclone DX, what if I just like embed a Cyclone DX package on the Syft package struct, and I say, here's a copy of the thing that came in. I'm gonna have like a function that fills out the Syft package so that the rest of the ecosystem knows how to treat the Syft package correctly. But when it becomes time for me to report this as Cyclone DX or to report this as SPDX, the format encoders refer to the direct source of truth, which is like the metadata of either that Cyclone DX or SPDX package that came on the input, right? Do we want to couple those together ever, or are we still okay with the throw it over the fence and this data field maps to this data field when we're converting between the package types?
Well, and what if I throw one other thing in the mix, which is what if I'm somebody using Syft and I want to set some specific Cyclone DX property on something too, because I need that for whatever use case I have somewhere else. Right. So like that's another aspect of like something that isn't really in the Syft data model, and the user wanting to like move it through whatever its internal stuff is going on in Syft and get, something from the out, the input to the output there. I mean, I think like generally speaking, what we want to do is try to map everything that we can to the Syft data model, of course, right? Like that's the goal, but the problem is when we have things that don't cleanly map there. I mean, I don't want to like postulate too much about like, oh, what Syft could be that, Syft 2 or whatever, but one of the things that I've kind of thought would be useful is being able to have multiple types of metadata with a package that would solve like a number of problems that we have. And one of the things you could do with that is like have a metadata object that has a reference back to the original like Cyclone DX structure that it has, right? And then we could have some other stuff that we had inferred, and maybe there's a Python metadata also that we do matching with and all the stuff like that. But I'm not really sure how we'd be able to do something like that today.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what we do with the Python metadata, where we have a specific Python metadata type that like adheres to the egg wheel metadata or adheres to the poetry locker, however we discovered the package. But in this case, we make a type of metadata that is a metadata that's akin to the formats, so like an SPDX metadata or a Cyclone DX metadata type. And so if we're reading in stuff from a cataloger and it's of that type, then you kind of save all those fields so that you're not lossy. And then you have where it gets weird in the design space is like what happens when those fields are duplicates to what is at the top level key value pair of a Syft package, right? So that's where my brain kind of goes sideways on it.
Yeah, well, I think like the problem for me is that what we do when we decode these SBOMs is that we do try to move stuff back into whatever Syft data model we can. And so we do end up creating metadata types sometimes for stuff that we read. Let's say for argument's sake, we didn't do that. We could today maybe just have a metadata that's like imported from thing, right? And then it has like whatever structure it got imported from. Maybe it was imported from a CycleNDX document, and then boom, there's the CycleNDX structure or something like that. And so the importers and exporters would know what to do with that, and maybe it just gets dropped if you go to the wrong format. But maybe if it doesn't if you're going to the right format. But the problem that I see that we run into is that all of a sudden we have like this dichotomy where some things we can do that with, but some things we're creating metadata because we know we need to for whatever reason. And I think like maybe that's kind of where you're going, Chris, but that's the block that I kind of hit. It was like, I don't know what to do here.
Do we need
There's
an
some,
Alex in the room, or do we need to like discuss this further? What I mean, it feels like a larger architectural question.
Well, Will, you're about to say something, and then maybe we can decide how to press forward.
Yeah, I was about to ask if there's like an experiment or a spike or something we can run to try to get a little farther on this. But I think I don't know. Is there? It sounds like there's a fair amount of uncertainty, and a lot of it is around like what we might find. So maybe there's some like go look at data that can be done.
So I Beetlejuiced Alex by mentioning his name. He appears.
Hiyo. How's it
Hey.
going?
Good. I guess like, yeah, we
In
don't
summary.
have to rehash too much, but yeah, just like the summary, we've been talking about this one issue. And so the gist is, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, the gist is that somebody is doing a scan and the SBOM cataloger, they're using the SBOM cataloger, they're importing something, it's losing information because it's in a CycleNDX format and it's not a package type that we support to map to a Syft data model. So it's getting dropped and then they're, not getting that stuff. And so we discussed a couple of things, one of which was that we've talked about like having some like sidecar data or like some, that kind of like can move along for like imported stuff like that, but we don't really have a place for that at the moment. And maybe like being able to have like multiple metadatas, you could have a couple of things to like do something like that, but that's not a Syft one thing really at the moment, and et cetera, et cetera. So I guess we kind of like didn't really know what the next steps were. And so you came at a fortuitous time to help us decide what the next steps are here.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll see if it's better than my luck today. I had no internet, and then I had no power. Now I've got power and internet, so I can join.
I mentioned someone didn't have their charger, but I wasn't going to throw you under the bus, and but you've outed yourself there, so that's
Well,
fine.
it's funny because the whole reason why I left is I had no internet, and then I was like, I left the charger at home, so it's, whatever. Anyway, so yeah, this one's fun because kind of on that first one that you're talking about, Keith, for like the sidecar. I think there's a path in Syft where even in 1.0, where the SBOM object, like on the convert path, gets to keep, if you're like bringing something from some CycleNDX or from SPDX, we can keep those original SPDX and CycleNDX lib objects with the SBOM object. This doesn't speak to the like, and how does this, like, how would this then be piped through to say Syft JSON? That's an unsolved problem. But from an API perspective, that's something that's probably going to happen. All design details have not been figured. But yeah, I mean, this one is all sorts of fun.
Well, this one also has like one other thing that might be a lot easier to deal with. This one specifically, I think they're asking about, like, what we're doing is we're explicitly looking for a couple of types of packages in CycleNDX when we import it, and just drop things that aren't application type, I think, and library type. And then there's like, other stuff, maybe the OS type we know how to deal with, but then some things we don't know how to deal with, we just drop them. And so, I mean, to me, one other kind of easy thing for at least for this particular thing is to just like add a couple of types of packages for things that we, know that we can import. It's really package structure. It fits in nicely to the, this is all assuming this is true. We can import it into the package structure. It has a new, a new type that we define that, and it like no catalogers create it. It's just from the import path. And that could probably work too, I think personally, but like, we just have to identify all those types that we could effectively do that with. I guess like since we've like spent a good 30 minutes talking about this one already, we could probably move on. But in terms of like I definitely think we should at least like backlog this. I think Will had a good suggestion, maybe like have a spike about the sidecar data probably I think would be the best.
I was going to take on Will's suggestion and play around with a couple of ways to solve this and present to people maybe going forward of what we want to do with it.
Yeah, but it might be also worth as part of that getting a specific list of like information that you can write down in CDX or SPDX, but not in Syft JSON today. Like we found these two package types because they were reported, but it might be worth knowing what all the limitations are.
Build like just get the whole scope of what currently isn't mapped and what is lost, whether it's via convert or via the SBOM cataloger. And the one sidecar problem that I really wanted to kind of dive on for maybe Syft 2.0 is that if Syft packages are all going to be a superset of either of the formats, then if not as the metadata type, then some other field should be able to represent all of the things for either format that exists on the package. So they should be like, you should have an embedded struct or like something on the Syft package that explicitly says, hey, I was discovered as part of an SPDX document, or I was discovered as part of a CycloneDX document, just so that you can pin that context into what you're capturing. And you're not just saying, oh, this wasn't just like a device driver that was on the system scan that came in. This was a device driver that, someone imported and brought in through the SBOM cataloger. And it has all these data field types because it was in the format of CycloneDX and not, an SBOM that we generated ourselves. All right, I'll run with it. Sorry, I thought this was going to be an easy warm-up. So sorry. Sorry to take the first 25, 30 minutes. Alan, floor is yours. Go on to the next easy one.
Good. It's all good. So you have that one. So are there any others that anyone wanted to specifically talk about? That one looks fun. I know Will tagged one. I saw earlier.
The detect WordPress one, I think we've basically settled. It was just like what package types. Like if we detect a pile of PHP on the file system and we believe it is WordPress itself, what package types should we emit? And I think we've sort of answered it. So
okay,
I don't think
so
that's
we're not
going to be a great discussion.
Okay. Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, I put we could talk about that one. So there are a number of string fields in Grype's config file YAML that are paths on the file system. And right now they are taken sort of as is. And that I think there should be a little bit of environment expanding. Maybe we literally just replace tilde with the current value of home at runtime and replace like $HOME with that value and replace $tempdir with that value. But Alex had mentioned that it might be more complicated than I'm realizing, and that's why I slapped a need discussion on it. It seems so maybe there's something I'm not realizing.
Maybe we're we weren't talking on the same page. Like, so because we have a spot in the code where we are already handling this. We just handle it in like this one spot. And I thought maybe I just read this wrong. I thought what you were saying was like figure out if something looks path-like and then auto magically do this.
Well, no, I think probably what I would want to do is have a type of config object. So you call it like local path, an alias is an alias of string on the config, and then we have like Grype cache dir is
Yeah.
of type local path. I mean, yeah, it's a string, but like okay,
Yeah.
cool. So
Yeah,
we know
way.
That would be
okay.
perfect. That's
and that would
exactly.
be in Clio, I guess, is where that would go.
Yep.
Okay. I will make a Clio issue and link it to this. And we can remove
So
needs discussion.
I thought it was like to detect pathy like things in strings from config and like auto expand. I was like, that sounds scary. But yeah, that makes
No.
I like
just
that.
meant like fields that we know statically are strings that happen to represent paths. We should make a reasonable effort to expand at least like home and temp dir and tilde. And I think that should surprise anybody.
What do other people do? Like something like MAME, or I realize this is not related, but MAME has a gigantic config file, optional config file, and you put all your paths to your ROMs and all that kind of stuff in there. Do they just like do it correctly in that they just go through and like do the path replace the environment variable replacing? Because I know I've certainly seen some applications which just don't do that. Like there's a game development engine that doesn't, and you have to explicitly hardwire the paths in, right?
I think one of the decisions we've made is that when we dump out the config, we replace home with tildes. And the reason we do that is to make it easier to, I think, easier to share and post like Grype configs, but then that turns it into a little bit of a trap because like Grype config can dump out a config file that Grype can't interpret, which is pretty bad, and we should have fixed it a while ago.
Right. Okay,
so
that does make sense. That is basically what that says, right? You know, we generate a config file we can't read, right? No, can't use.
Yeah. So I think I'll write that Clio issue, and then hopefully we can get this taken care of sort of soon, because it's been separately reported a couple times, which is always good signal that it's bothering real users, and we should fix it promptly. So we will do that.
Yeah.
Well,
and
there's,
like
there's a... Go ahead, Alex.
Go for it. Oh. Okay. Well, we use the Mitchell Hashimoto Go Home Dir like in like little like a few spots, and like it sounds like just using that up in Clio is probably like the way, because it handles like a bunch of cases and it's cross-platform, and it's been archived. That's good to know. No.
Brilliant.
All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to eat my words on that one.
We use Anchore Go Home Dir. It's wait.
Yeah. Honestly.
Yeah, that's probably worth like every Go code base I've been in that like runs on end user workstations resolves local paths using Go Home Dir. I'm very surprised that this is archived.
Is there a gist that explains that or something? Or there we go. Okay, so it's just for personal reasons. Oh golly.
Okay, it seems like there might be a bit of a gap in the community for. Maybe we could get maybe we could do a good job, like forking it and taking up maintenance. He's put links to like blessed forks on here. Maybe it's worth. I don't know. Maybe we're too busy, but it would be nice for there to be a blessed fork of Go Home Dir. And we do a lot of end user workstation tools in Go, so we need it to keep existing. So that's sort of my vote. Turns out there was discussion in this issue after all.
Yeah, I'm going to make a note of that in the notes under the thing. So I've made a note of that. Do we want
I
to move
did-
on to something else?
I did want to just touch on one quick thing that
Mhm.
was said, and which is the config file that gets generated like doesn't work. And I wanted to point out that like there's at least one case that will always be true for, and that's for secrets, because those are always redacted from everything. And so like, you know,
Yeah,
so
but
this
I,
should work.
yeah, and I think that's okay. Like if I dump out the config file and then I go to run it, and it's like you're not really logged into ECR, and then I go look at it, and there's just star 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 as like the ECR, Docker password or whatever. Like that's fine. Like that's much less surprising than putting the database in the wrong place on a default config, right? So I think the secrets is like, one, it's unfixable, and two, I think it's pretty understandable.
Nobody wants to wait for 200 meg to download for me to show that. By the way, I also, further to our conversation earlier about Grype 012 or whatever it was, I downloaded that on another machine, and when you run it, a Grype DB update, it just sits there and doesn't actually, and it doesn't tell you that there's so the auto update mechanism that tells you there's a new version of Grype wasn't implemented back then. So yeah, if you had that version, it's broken now. Yeah, so that's fine. So yeah, now I've got a lovely tilde file in my temp directory. That's wonderful. Yes, it would be good to fix that. Super. Good discussion. Good work. Right, Alex, you're here. We're going around asking people if they have a needs discussion issue that they would like to talk about. Did you add any on here?
I don't think I added one this week, so. Let's see.
Are there any? Let's look for. Oh, these are recently updated, so we've done that. We already know that. What about the? Didn't we talk about that last week? The pet problem
we
for
did.
Ubuntu packages.
Yeah.
Customized top
We've
level
talked-
metadata.
We've talked about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
has there been any further? Are we waiting a response, or what do we set that to?
I think we're waiting
Needs
on
discussion.
on like a UX design. Like we're waiting on like a right. So this is basically the request to be able to put more, like a lot of SBOMs include stuff about like who published the artifact and when and what its official name is and what the bug report URL is. They aren't really properties of the artifact. They should be configured by the person making the SBOM at scan time. And Syft doesn't provide a great way of specifying all of them right now. So we're waiting for good UX on how that should be done. So someone needs to go, this shouldn't be needs discussion anymore. I think it should be needs investigation, needs somebody to build a prototype so we can see what it looks like, that sort of thing.
Needs investigation.
Yeah, or needs prototype. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Investigation.
That's a good
Yeah. Needs a new label. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a great label to have, actually. Meta label.
Oh, dear. Right. So, anything else? We've done that one.
I mean, there's one. I guess there's one I could bring up again. We've chatted about this before, and it's come up in like side conversations, but I don't think it's come up like in one of these live stream discussions. It's Grype 1409. Here, I'll link it. Should we merge the Grype and GrypeDB projects? So, so yeah, this
You
actually
really
might not
did
be a
want to
great one.
consume the next 15 minutes, didn't you? Well
Yeah,
done.
exactly. Yeah, I was about to say this might not be the best one because we'll probably eat up the last bit of time. So if anybody has any other needs discussions that they wanted, shout out and cut the line.
No, I got in my soapbox already.
All right. Yeah, I mean, so the ask is clear. Should we merge these projects? The why and the impacts, like this one you could just say like needs investigation, move on, but I still think that there's room for discussion on this one, even outside of the investigation. So right now we have, a lot of Go projects, and the funny thing about these two projects is that the fact that they are two projects is a little fictitious. Like the only reason why there are two projects is because when we first started these projects, we did not get a go ahead to open source like the GrypeDB building portion. And so we knew we were going to one day, but we did not get the go ahead on day one. So they had to be split. And that split has always caused issues. So we used to have like a GrypeDB lib that would be just like the database schemas, and that would be ingested by like the builder application and Grype. And then eventually that lib went away, and GrypeDB today currently imports Grype. What, are you shocked at the 37? What's the
Yeah, it's one of the lowest of all of them, and it's like a pivotal part of our whole platform.
Well,
yeah.
it's also like built like as a side point in this discussion, like building your own Grype database and trying it should be a lot easier, and we want it to be a lot easier.
Right.
I think that there's this is the repository that has the like cron jobs defined in GitHub Actions that run every night that make a new SQLite database for Grype to download and match vulnerabilities against. So it's a very key part of the infrastructure, but it's also kind of more server side than Met. It's not superintended that everyone who runs Grype needs to go install this. Just as a little more background on it. And it orchestrates the other thing I think that's not immediately obvious about it. It is an orchestrator over Vunnel. So Vunnel is the thing that actually like downloads the vulnerability database from Red Hat and from Ubuntu and from Azure Linux and from all these places. And so the where Grype databases come from is like there's a cron in GitHub Actions tells GrypeDB to go pull new data, and then GrypeDB runs Vunnel. Vunnel pulls the new data, and then GrypeDB runs a transform and package job and puts it up in a CDN. So there is a little bit of difference. And so one of the things I think where I'm going with this is even if we merge the projects, like running Grype build me a new database right now will still take hours and require Vunnel, which is a big and sort of legacy Python project. So that's I don't know. That's just a bunch of background that I realize people might not have. Sorry to interrupt,
Thank
Alex.
you.
Go.
No, it's okay. I mean, yeah, go for it, Keith.
I would also just say, like, I recently like changed my downward thumb to an upward thumb on there. I just like have just recently like was looking at something like this, and I have some like. At first, I was like opposed to it, and I have a way I think that it should work, but it's a really kind of tricky thing right now because of the 5 databases that are, well, 3 soon to be 4 databases that are published. I don't know, if it, I will just throw this out here, and then if it were me, I think like GrypeDB as a lib makes the most sense. And the GrypeDB as a command, you can run it. It like I'm gonna just ignore the Vunnel thing for a moment. I know that there's like something there that's like important, but I'm gonna ignore that for a moment. I would like to just be able to run GrypeDB to like build a database, to do a DB diff. I don't know, to do all the database stuff maybe that I need to do. It needs the data model. It would be very easy to have like a v6 data model that's there, and then in Grype import the v6 data model, and then use that, and like right now that just lives in Grype, but I feel like that could be shifted fairly easily to Grype DB. And that to me like seems the most, because sorry, I know you're gonna say something, but let me say one other thing. It seems the most logical, because it seems like if there was some, like, I know I hand waved at Vunnel, but like if there was some way that like Vunnel was somehow more integrated, then I could go and make a single PR that has everything that's needed to like add something to the Grype database and at Grype DB, and Grype would just kind of like in theory magically like pick that up when it updates to like the new version.
Yeah. Another big advantage of merging them is that it fixes a bootstrapping problem where like GrypeDB is writing the database in a format that Grype can read, which means in practice it is serializing structs that are defined in Grype, which means if we want to change these structs, the workflow is like kind of confusing because like we want main in GrypeDB to depend on a released version of Grype, but then we have to like define a new database schema in Grype and then release it and then import it in GrypeDB and then publish it. And like so there's a bunch of like development branches pointing at each other to see if to build a new schema, and that's really brittle. And it also makes it I think it's a big obstacle to like community members helping us with stuff like that. So yeah, they need to agree on, because they need to agree on a bunch of stuff, right? Like GrypeDB makes the database and Grype reads the database, and so they need to agree on broadly like what's in the database and how it looks, and that agreement is like, yeah. I also think another signal that they should be the same project is that we could have a long debate over which one should import which one. Right. I think the only other way that makes sense is if the schema is a library that they both depend on. Like I think that would also make sense and work fine. But it wouldn't get any of the benefits Keith was talking about being able to make a single PR that like improves the data. And you can imagine like, I don't know, you can imagine a really nice, like, we found a bug somewhere in the data transform where, like, I don't know, some field in Debian's issue tracker gets mapped weirdly and you want to fix it. And, like, right now you got to fix it in Funnel. Maybe you have to tell GrypeDB about the fix and you have to tell Grype about the fix. And so then these PRs are, like, racing and in different languages. So, yeah, I guess all that to say, I think I agree with a lot of what Keith said.
Can I mention that there's a downvote on it? Have we spoken to Weston about why that downvote is there, and is it something we can, by proxy, articulate here?
I have, but I forget the context. I'm gonna have to go back and talk to him again. But I did ask him about it. But that was a while ago. So.
Okay.
So I don't want to lie. So I won't.
I will agree that I think an important factor, apart from the maintenance of having to have a split brain approach of where you're maintaining two things together. I completely get that. From my personal selfish opinion, I'm quite keen for people it to be easier to maintain from a new person's perspective. And when the on-ramp is so high and requires you to have have a bunch of spinning plates that have to like land at the same time, it makes it a bit of a barrier to entry, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and like the Grype DB as a lib, so we had that pattern in the past, and like we're actually currently technically blocked from doing that pattern right now. So I've done some investigation on like, what happens if we invert the dependencies, or what happens if we pull it out. And like the short answer is right now we have one version of the database schema that is coupled to Grype types. So if we were to pull out the database schema stuff into a lib, and say we were to pull them all 1 through 6 out, because 6 is now in the code base too, like, then that would still import Grype, and Grype would import that. And Go allows for module cycles. I highly don't recommend doing that though. so it doesn't allow for package cycles, but it allows for module cycles. So we would have to essentially wait until we like deprecated and deleted that schema. I think it's either 4 or 5 or both that have that fate.
Okay. Chris, are you already on board with this?
I think I gave a thumbs up on it. Yeah, I was good.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
wanted to. Go ahead.
And I'll mention one more thing. I believe this is going to be a sensitive factor for planning for Grype 1.0, something that like we know is on the horizon, like, Q1 next year is when that planning really starts. And I think this question needs to be kind of squarely answered by that point, by the time we start that planning, because that will, impact scope, impact like what the other things that we can do. So that's my last footnote there. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, in terms of making Grype and GrypeDB easier to work on, right now there are sort of only 2 like possible, like, right now the interface between GrypeDB and Funnel is something that I think could be approved. Like right now, by default, it'll try to Docker run Anchore Funnel latest with whatever args you give it, and people have tried to work on it and been surprised they need Docker, or it'll just look for something called funnel on path. And it might be nice to say that you can either tell it to use Podman or tell it to use a particular Python virtual environment. Those would both be pretty cheap improvements to GrypeDB that might make it easier for people to get into their workflow. I know I'm always a little sad when I'm like, I want to work on this project. It's like, oh, you have to install this giant other thing. So that might be a nice, in case people already have Podman or are more comfortable, like saying like, here, use this Python interpreter, use this virtual environment.
Is this
that would be a cheap
so? You
way of
commented
making it easier.
You said by default. Sorry to interrupt you, Will. The uses this by default or goes looking in your path. So like, is that just a config thing? It like down here, how it launches Funnel, is that won't be there.
Yeah. It's called
GrypeDB config.
Oh, it's a GrypeDB.
Yeah, it's a
config, of course.
GrypeDB config.
Right.
Yeah, so you're looking at the funnel config. So
Yeah.
but
It's down the bottom.
yeah,
there,
the GrypeDB has a config that basically says like this is funnel, and so executor Docker, and then what, like you can specify a different image. You can change that to local, and then it'll look on path. Those are the only two values that do anything. And it would be nice. I think it might be nice to have a path to a Python interpreter or like a virtual env, or Podman. I think those would both be pretty easy.
It might be nice to have a default config that actually excluded all of the providers that had a API key requirement and like only goes looking for the ones that you could freely access. Like, I don't know, NVD, I guess, is maybe one. And so that by default, you could get up and running super fast with the default config,
Yeah, that might be nice.
Yeah, I mean, I also think we should probably add some stuff in Funnel that does like a config check kind of thing. So like a pre-flight. So when you do GrypeDB like run it, like you get that pre-flight check, and you see like the specific failures and so because we're kind of missing that right now. Right now, it like fails, and you're like, okay, sift through the logs. What's there? Oh, there's a key missing. Like, but yeah, like you're right. Like being able to say like I mean, people usually don't want to say like, I just want the free ones. They usually they know, because it would be kind of bad if you built a database and you didn't know what providers were going to go in it, so to speak. Like if you needed GitHub security advisories but like you just didn't do it because you selected free and then it wasn't clear it was going to be added, that would be that might be a little surprising too.
I was thinking more of the brand new person who's maybe wanting to add something to Funnel, add a provider to Funnel. Do they really want it to go and get all these other ones as well? Especially, do I want to get a key for GitHub if I'm only going to add a new one for foo Linux or something?
Yeah. There's a -p option on pull to say so if I'm working on a new Funnel provider, it's called foo, then in GrypeDB, I could do GrypeDB pull -p foo, and it's only going to run foo. So,
right. Cool.
Yeah, that's the most direct
basic
developer face. Yeah.
Right.
Way to do that.
Nice. We've actually hit the top of the hour. Sorry, I didn't want to cut anyone off, but we are up to 1 hour, and I think
These minutes aren't free.
Yeah. Any last comment from anyone?
Sound Will, you're about to say something. Okay.
Nope.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. That was great. We had some nice long discussion and a couple of short ones. If you want to join us for these, I think we're not doing it next week because it's American holiday time where you all get fat, isn't it?
Yep.
Thanksgiving. Yeah. So I'll be the only one in the office, but I'm not doing this on my own. Maybe something. So nothing next week. We'll be back in 2 weeks, I suspect. You'll all have recovered by the week after, I imagine. And we'll do, we'll do more of this. Thanks everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for getting involved, and see you next time.
Take care.
Cheers.
Ta-da. Bye.